and contain your emotions. Among us.
I have a terrible confession to make. I used to really like Harry Potter. And I mean, I really liked Harry Potter. I went to a release party for the 6th book at the age of 9, spent an entire day reading it, and then did the same thing 2 years later for Deathly Hallows. And even up into college, I dressed up as Harry Potter for my dormitory's Hogwarts night and performed for guests. Harry Potter used to mean everything to me. The books came out at just the right time for me to get sucked into them, and the film adaptations only cemented my fervor. These stories had a big influence on who I grew to be as a person, which really hurts to say now. Yeah, I'm gonna get this out of the way. J.K. Rowling has gone insane. And you know what? Let me make 2 things perfectly clear for the record. 1, the right to express your gender identity however you wish, including a gender different from the one you were assigned at birth, is an essential right. Transgender people are an essential part of the queer community and will always find support on my channel. 2, this isn't a case of, oh, J.K. Rowling broke from the orthodoxy, hashtag cancel J.K. Rowling. This is a case of, she wrote an anti-queer manifesto that has already been cited in the US Congress to block civil rights protections. And for someone who claims to just be concerned about women's rights, she seems to associate with and promote a lot of people who want to limit women's rights. And worse. But this video isn't about whether or not she's a bad person. I mean, she is, but the main point of this video is whether or not she's a bad screenwriter. Which she also is. This video is about my love for the Harry Potter franchise and how one horrible, awful movie shattered it. So let's start from the beginning. Harry Potter proper. In recent years, I've not really felt compelled to say many good things about the Harry Potter series, for obvious reasons. But like I said, I did enjoy it. Sure, they're not the best children's books out there, and sure, some people could really benefit from reading something outside this franchise.
Rowling's real importance lies in the fact that she was the first writer to present a world in which class and wealth mattered. Some characters are poor, some were rich, and being poor was a hardship, not just a cheery, sentimental thing in the scenery. Oh, my brain just broke.
But there was still something to them that was, well, magical to me. Especially in the early part of the series, it felt like there was a sense of whimsical discovery, finding more and more parts of this magical world. Being a kid and reading about the school where you could meet ghosts, where you could ride broomsticks for PE, where you could punch racists in the face was so cool. Okay, that last one was added in the movies, but still. My point is, the idea of going to magic school captivated me. And I was excited for us to get more when Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them hit theaters in 2016. And honestly, I think this movie is pretty good. What's important to note is that this is the first time J.K. Rowling ventured into screenwriting. The Harry Potter movies were based on her books, but the scripts were adapted and written by other people. This time around, J.K. Rowling directly wrote the movie, and it actually turned out pretty alright. I'd say the weakest aspects of this movie are the elements with Grindelwald and Credence, but the best parts are, well, the Fantastic Beasts. The overall plot is very simple. Newt Scamander, famous magizoologist, is trying to smuggle a Thunderbird to its home habitat in the American Southwest. But oh no! He accidentally switches bags with a muggle named Jacob and all his creatures get loose. Now he and Jacob and Tina, a local wizard cop, all have to try and figure out where to find the Fantastic Beasts before people get hurt and the wizarding world is exposed. It's not the most high-stakes story, and honestly that's kind of why I like it. Seeing the gang going through all these antics and encountering all these weird little critters makes for a fun experience. And even if the plot around Credence and Grindelwald isn't as engaging, it still at least ties in since Credence is himself a Fantastic Beast, afflicted with an Obscurus. And I think Newt failing to help him makes for an interesting turn of events. He fails, and Credence just explodes in a New York subway. It underscores the idea that Newt's not really a hero. He's just a magizoologist trying to do his work. The central cast of characters here are pretty good. Jacob Kowalski is my favorite of the cast, and I like the turn this signals. The addition of a muggle main character makes for a fun fish-out-of-water dynamic. Jacob's a regular, simple, good-natured guy who is having trouble opening the bakery of his dreams. He's just very likable. Newt Scamander is also a fairly simple guy who is more comfortable with animals than people. And like I mentioned before, I really appreciate that he's not a big player in this universe. Tina is... I mean, she's fine, I guess. I actually don't remember her all that much. But then you have Tina's sister Queenie, who has a fun, quirky attitude. She's got some zest to her. She can seem airy and scatterbrained at times, but she proves clever and quick-witted when need be. Again, it's not like the greatest movie ever, but I still enjoyed it. It's a neat little adventure movie, and I think it set up a lot of potential. And then the franchise began to crumble. The same year this movie came out, we got Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, a stage show that was also billed as the 8th Harry Potter story, and it's kinda bad. I mean, it's got some good ideas. The idea of Harry's kid having to deal with living in his father's shadow feels like a natural progression, but so much of the story doesn't add up. The time travel mechanic contradicts the earlier continuity. The Hogwarts Express sweet trolley lady being revealed as a monster is baffling to say the least, and it introduces a love child between Bellatrix and Voldemort. Like, Bellatrix and... I'm okay. And it also assassinates the character of Cedric Diggory. Okay, give me a chance to go into detail on this. Albus Potter's plan is to show how much better he is than his father by going back in time to save Cedric Diggory's life. And they do this by sabotaging the Triwizard Tournament so that Cedric doesn't end up grabbing the portkey at the same time as Harry, ergo, Voldemort doesn't kill him. But the humiliation turns Cedric Diggory into a Death Eater. Cedric Diggory. Cedric, we won a Quidditch match against Gryffindor, but it wanted us to call a rematch because Harry fainted off his broom and it wasn't fair. Diggory becomes a wizard Nazi because he got sabotaged and laughed at. And so he kills Neville, who then can't kill Nagini, which means not all of the Horcruxes are destroyed, which means Voldemort wins and takes over the world. I've heard of the butterfly effect, but Jesus Christ. It's such an insane combination of broken characterization and an outlandish scenario that I was convinced that Jack Thorne and John Tiffany had butchered the original story. It's just based off a short story by J.K. Rowling. She's still a good writer, right? She would never just ignore her pre-established world and characters. This is just a hiccup.
A part of the final battle that made me smile was Slughorn galloping back with Slytherins. Yes. But they'd gone off to get reinforcements first, you know what I'm saying? So that yes, they came back to fight.
That wasn't in the book or the movie at all. Did she just retcon her own book in a podcast? I mean, okay, that's just a mistake. That's nothing too bad, right?
Hogwarts didn't always have bathrooms. Before adopting Muggle plumbing methods in the 18th century, witches and wizards simply relieved themselves wherever they stood and vanished the evidence.
Okay, that's kind of the worst, but the new movie will still be good. It has to be good. There's no way it'll be that bad. Oh no. Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald came out in 2018, and it is honestly one of the worst Hollywood studio movies I've ever seen in my life. If you forced me to choose between Crimes of Grindelwald and The Rise of Skywalker, I would not even hesitate. And the thing is, a lot of elements in this movie are at least decent. You have actors that are good in these roles. You have James Newton Howard genuinely killing it on the soundtrack. The directing is... well, okay, I'll talk about that a little later. But what really shackles the story down is the screenplay. J.K. Rowling's screenplay is a series of bad ideas executed badly. And I'm going to set the bar on the floor here. The whole opening sequence where Grindelwald escapes from his magical carriage transport when there are other far more secure ways to transport him, like literal teleportation. Not even gonna touch that. They wanted to make a cool, energetic set piece to open the movie on. I'll accept that. I'll also handwave things like McGonagall teaching at Hogwarts in 1910, 25 years before she was canonically born. Or Newt using a summoning charm on the Niffler, a living creature, which he can't use the summoning charm on. A lot of people like to hold these up as mortal sins of the movie, but honestly, to me, they're just minor issues that I could otherwise overlook. These make the story haphazard, yes, but they don't make the story bad. What makes the story bad starts in the scene with Newt at the Ministry of Magic. We get two new characters introduced to us. Newt's brother Theseus, who works as a magic cop, and Newt's old schoolmate Lita.
How long did you get in detention for saying that to Prendergast?
I think it was a month that time.
And I set off a dung bomb onto his desk so I could join you. Do you remember?
Yay, love a dialogue backstory. Woo! Anyways, Newt's been banned from traveling internationally after the events of the last movie. But the Ministry will lift the ban if Newt helps them find... What?
I'm sorry, you're talking about Credence as if he were still here.
He survived, Newt. He's still alive.
Credence survived... this? Now yes, the first movie has this moment where Newt sees a little black strand of the Obscurus swim away. I thought this was the Obscurus itself crawling away to infect someone else. It certainly wasn't enough for Newt, the guy who actually sees this, to think Credence was still alive. I don't think such a blink and you'll miss it moment is enough information to visually tell the audience that this was not an actual death. This was not a small thing, this was an entire half of the movie being resolved in tragedy. This is the first major problem with Crimes of Grindelwald. It undoes this massive dramatic moment in a way that doesn't really feel equivalent. There's a cut scene from the opening that shows them coming together, and I think this would have been enough to get people to say, okay, he's back now. But if it's not in the movie, then it doesn't count. Even if technically Credence's survival was foreshadowed in the first movie's ending, I think it's understandable why a lot of people see this as a retcon. This scene also exposes two subtler but just as detrimental issues with the story. One, actually I already described the previous thing as being first. Second, we're about to get a lot more characters pushed into an already full cast, and it's going to start crowding some of the main characters aside. And speaking of, second B, Newt the Fantastic Beasts guy no longer wants to be the lead of the Fantastic Beasts movies. I get why the Ministry may want him on their side, it was one of his beasts that caught Grindelwald in the first movie. But if Newt as a character refuses to get involved in the main conflict, and has no visible stake in it, then we the audience don't really care. Now refusing the call to adventure is a trope used in stories, and Newt does have a change of heart where he comes around to hugging his brother back and saying he's on his side. The problem is that this happens at the end of this movie. This is technically a character arc, but it takes too long to move Newt too little, and as a result, I don't really feel invested in much of anything that's going to happen. Later that night, Newt is at home and he hears someone in his place. He investigates and... last I checked, Jacob had his memory wiped at the end of the first movie. And sure, it ends in this way that suggests that, oh, maybe he has a few shreds of memory, like unconsciously or something, that inspires baking. And then Queenie comes in and you think, okay, maybe they can start over and rekindle the romance anew. That's a nice thought. You know, maybe that's what's going on here. Let's see.
You were supposed to have been obliviated.
It didn't work, pal. But you said it. The potion only erases bad memories. I didn't have any.
Okay, look. The resolution of the last movie with Obliviation Potion being put in the rain was already kinda flimsy, but it still gave us this moment where they have to say goodbye to Jacob. Even if the mechanics of the story leap a bit to get us here, this is still one of the most resonant images of the whole film. It's one of the only parts that has any emotional weight, and it's just gone now. It didn't work. But it doesn't stop there. Newt asks if Tina is around, and it turns out Tina is mad at him because of some tabloid story that said that Newt was marrying... God, I'm writing this and I can't remember her name. Leta, that's it. See what I said about there being too many characters? Anyways, the tabloid said Leta Lestrange married Newt, but she's actually marrying Newt's brother Theseus. And because of this misprint, Tina is now not talking to Newt, which, like, putting aside how utterly contrived this is, why does Tina feel betrayed by this? They were not dating. The first movie had little more than an oh maybe they want to do the do to get the fans rolling on Tumblr. And this setup keeps going through the movie because Newt can't manage to put his words together and Tina can't be bothered to listen to him for 5 seconds. I love it when conflict is sustained by adults acting like kindergartners. But this scene is not done ruining the story yet. And I saved the best for last, because it turns out Jacob has been kidnapped and placed under our mind control spell from Queenie. She has hypnotized him in order to marry him against his will. Jesus Christ. Okay, so the reason Queenie did this is that the United States has a rule forbidding a marriage between a wizard and non-wizard. Jacob doesn't want her to end up in jail, so he declined to formally marry her. Queenie doesn't care though, and wants to marry Jacob anyways, regardless of the consequences. But no matter her reasoning, this action is so very, very wrong. If you have trouble imagining why, take the scenario and flip the genders in your head. Does the idea of a man enchanting a woman into being in love with them make you really uncomfortable? It's the exact same ick factor the other way around. And the problem is that the movie doesn't really treat it as such. Jacob acts like Queenie just did a little oopsie poopsie.
Sweetheart, you don't need to enchant me. I'm already enchanted. I love you so much.
In fact, when the discussion gets heated, it suddenly becomes his fault for even thinking how mad he is at her.
I'm a coward, you're
Crazy.
I didn't say it.
You didn't have to.
No, I didn't mean it, sweetheart.
I would like to reiterate that Queenie mind-controlled Jacob to marry him against his will, moved him across the ocean in this state, and it's implied she was going to keep it on until she had kids with him. I think crazy is on the nicer end of words he can use. So now Queenie has gone from being the spunky woman to a selfish, borderline psychopath with no regard for others' well-being. And Jacob is just okay with this. And bless their hearts, Dan Fogler and Alison Sudol are trying to sell this. They're really trying. But this scenario is not given the gravity it needs, and it just feels wrong. Again, the first Fantastic Beasts film is good, not great, but it at least felt like it had a foundation to build off of. Crimes of Grindelwald has taken that foundation and detonated all its strongest components, and the movie's still just getting started. So here's where everything stands. Jacob wants to find Queenie to clear up their misunderstanding. Newt wants to find Tina to clear up their misunderstanding. Tina is trying to find Credence. Along the way, she meets this man named Comma who also wants to find Credence, and then he traps her in this jail off screen. Dumbledore and Grindelwald each also want to find Credence because he's the last remnant of some important bloodline, I guess. And Credence wants to find this half-elf lady so that he can find his family, and he's joined by... we'll get back to her in a bit. The point is, we have this massive web of conflicts that just keeps ballooning and tangling in on itself. Lita Lestrange gets swept in, and we have an extended flashback scene of her at Hogwarts with Newt. So much screen time gets dedicated to her, and then she just dies at the end. Spoilers, I guess. So much of the rising action revolves around getting little crumbs of something dramatic that happened with her brother that she feels guilty about. It's about little whispered things here and there, but it's not done in a way that's engaging. A movie like Zodiac keeps me glued to the screen even when all we're seeing is paperwork and phone calls and discussions because the stakes are high. They're trying to catch an insane serial killer. I do not care about Lita Lestrange, the woman with the personality of a soggy paper towel. I don't think Lita even got mentioned in Secrets of Dumbledore. That's how little she matters to the story. I was trying to crawl through Wikipedia to remember all the characters, and apparently this guy is a returning character from the previous movie? Abernathy? Who the fuck was Abernathy? And apparently he stole this box. Wait, someone stole a box in this movie? I swear to God I watched this twice. I watched this twice. But this is what I'm talking about. There's too many moving parts, and none of them are interesting. And in fact, now that I think about it, even the Harry Potter series had this exact same problem. I reread them a little while back, and I remember being in the middle of Goblet of Fire and going, oh yeah, Barty Crouch was a significant portion of this book, wasn't he? And honestly, I still don't really care about that whole plot line. In fact, the latter half of the book series really suffered from bloat. This problem has kind of been there all along, hasn't it? Because look, you can cut out Comma and Lita and fucking Abernathy, and I feel like very little would be lost. It's especially mind-boggling to say about Lita considering that the movie seems to revolve a lot around her, but her plotline feels so empty. I'll get to that more near the end. But you can also cut out Newt and Jacob and Tina and Queenie, and the actual consequential parts of the plot are largely intact. The only characters that seem to really matter in this movie are Credence and Grindelwald. And their story boils down to, I don't know who I am. Hey, join my club and I'll tell you your family heritage. Oh, hey, neat. This movie has an hour and a half where people are acting on the screen and doing things and finding reveals and information, and yet it feels like nothing happens. And I think a big problem is that these characters don't get to be characters. They have all the personality of a saltine cracker. Like, look at this scene where Newt and Jacob have been trapped by Kama along with Tina. There are many ways they could get out of this. In fact, let's play a game. How will the trio escape Kama's prison? A. Tina uses her wizard cop know-how to engineer an escape plan. B. Newt asks one of his fantastic beasts to help them defeat Kama. C. Jacob uses his simple, focused personality to convince Kama to let them go. D. A weird worm creature that we've never seen before, will never see again, and don't get any explanation for, has infected Kama's eye and causes him to pass out, allowing the trio to simply walk out of their cells.
No.
There's very little initiative from any of the characters and very little motivation. Newt has to be dragged kicking and screaming into the main conflict by Dumbledore. Tina's just doing her job. Queenie's just walking around the city and crying. Lita is just there. There's so little driving force behind this movie. There's no sense of rising action or any feeling of characters getting near any goal, and as a result we get this gray blur of just nothing for 90 minutes. Literally a gray blur. David Yates, can you please add some goddamn saturation to your movies? Actually, yeah, this is a good spot to talk about this. While the screenwriting is the source of about 90% of this movie's problems, the direction and design don't really do it a lot of favors either. I have a love-hate relationship with David Yates' work on Harry Potter. Don't get me wrong, he's responsible for some of the best scenes in the entire franchise, but at the same time, the desaturated color palette he uses in his movies sucks the vibrance and whimsy from the story. Now, it works really well in certain scenes, but that misery-inducing approach is not a one-size-fits-all solution. You look at similar settings between movies and it becomes duller, more gray, less interesting. Now you can argue that this makes sense. It captures the idea of the Harry Potter series growing up and becoming more mature. But now that we're at this point, Crimes of Grindelwald is making me realize that the Harry Potter series didn't actually mature. It got darker, yes, and in these movies they crank that up even more. We don't get one, but two baby murders in Crimes of Grindelwald. Well, I guess one is technically baby manslaughter. Spoilers. But while the series got darker, it didn't really grow up. It did the rebellious teenage, it's not a phase mom kind of growing up, without actually maturing. And it's not for lack of trying. From Order of the Phoenix onwards, Rowling made her stories more and more political. And the same thing is happening here. Newt is now caught in this increasingly political story about a wizard terrorist who wants to upset the established order and is trying to secure allies with his rhetoric. Queenie is found by Grindelwald and he gives her rest and shelter, before dropping that, you know, in his world, there won't be any laws saying that wizards and muggles can't marry. One of the major scenes in this movie, one of the only scenes I remember, is a literal political rally. But the thing is, Rowling is extremely messy with her political themes in these movies. A political story requires strong characterization. It requires events that matter and aren't swept under the rug between installments. The fact that Queenie, the mind reader, buys so easily into Grindelwald's arguments doesn't make him look clever and makes her look dumb. This movie's follow-up really shows that off, with Secrets of Dumbledore positioning itself as a climactic political thriller. But rather than being a clash of ideas and strategies, the story is so unsubtle that it accidentally makes the Wizarding World look like it's populated and run by a bunch of daft morons who will just side with whatever they heard last. And you know what? Even in Harry Potter, yeah, there was the same issue. J.K. Rowling infamously introduced racial slavery in Chamber of Secrets with Dobby, and then tried to backtrack that in later installments to say, no, come on guys, it's not that bad. There's a plot beat in the final book where they see how goblins view ownership in a different way from humans. But rather than try to reconcile these cultural differences, they just plan to betray him. And it's okay because he also tried to betray them anyways. In the 5th book, this racist statue of the glorious wizards being looked up to by other magical peoples is destroyed in a confrontation with Voldemort, who hops up onto the pedestal instead. And in case that's too subtle, Dumbledore later in that book says, "The fountain we destroyed tonight told a lie. We wizards have mistreated and abused our fellows for too long, and we are now reaping our reward." This is a great setup that would make the series actually mature, to realize that these systemic issues have to be addressed in order to fully defeat Voldemort. J.K. Rowling set this up, and then Voldemort is defeated by technicality and wand ownership rules. These books started as quirky fantasy adventures for kids, and then tried to become mature political commentary. But watching this movie, I realized Rowling never reconciled those two things. These stories wanted to pretend they grew up with us, and yet they never did. They grew darker, but they never grew smarter, did they? Also, I don't know where else to talk about this, so I'll talk about it here. Why are all the wizard costumes boring now? Suit and a bowler hat, give me a break. Is this because they're trying to blend into Muggle society? Dumbledore sure didn't give a shit about that in the first Harry Potter. The characters were just so much more interesting back then. You have Big Friendly Giant Man, Old Grandpa Wizard, the Cat Lady, the Goth one, the Short one. Crimes of Grindelwald gives us Man in a Suit, Man in a Vest, Man in a Suit. The sequel. Where are the robes? Where's the whimsy and charm of this world? Did they switch the wardrobes just to make Jude Law's Dumbledore hot? I mean, it worked, but that's besides the point. This movie is so boring to look at, its story is so boring to follow, and it keeps insisting it's smarter than it actually is. Anyways, let's get to the snake in the room. Nagini should not be in this movie. I know you can say that about a lot of these characters, but this one especially. And that's not to say Claudia Kim is bad. If anything, I can't even really tell how good or bad she is at acting because the role is so small. It's not Kim's fault, it's the result of a total failure of storytelling and world building. First of all, we do not need a backstory for Nagini the Snake. Of all the characters to give a backstory, J.K. Rowling chose the one that's not even a character. Big snakes exist in the real world, and even if they didn't, I can pretty reasonably assume that magic can make a snake big. But so what if this inclusion is entirely purposeless? That doesn't mean she can't be an engaging character. Well, apparently it can, because she has nothing to do in this movie except stand next to Credence. Does she even have any lines?
Credence. C'est votre fils, madame. Credence. They're purebloods. They kill the likes of us for sport. He knows what you were born, not who you are.
Yeah, that's it. Nagini is entirely superfluous. But so what if Nagini is a deadweight character that wastes screen time? At least she doesn't break the world building. Well, actually she does, because you see, Nagini is cursed. She has been cursed to turn into a snake, and eventually one day she won't be able to turn back. And so witches and wizards flock to see the woman who can turn into a snake, and this makes no goddamn sense, because wizards can just turn into animals in this world. I mean, okay, you can't just do it. It takes a lot of practice, but it's not something particularly rare either. It's a skill that a person can reasonably learn to do. It's something that canonically a group of teenagers figured out while they were full-time students. I mean, imagine this. Step right on up, ladies and gentlemen, to witness something incredible. Behold, this young man is juggling, and one day he will be unable to stop juggling. And guess what? Nagini just doesn't show up again for Secrets of Dumbledore. She's just dropped. She did not matter at all. Everything about Nagini's character is an active detriment to the story. Or rather, it would be if the rest of the story wasn't also terrible. I guess you could say Nagini is like the crown jewel of terribleness, alongside the Kama and Lita flashback scene. And speaking of, this is one of the most incredible screenwriting feats I've ever seen. So we're getting near the end of the movie, and all our main characters are suddenly congregated in the same place by various means, such as a magical cat teleporting them there randomly, and seeing it in Nicholas Flamel's crystal ball. Sorry, buddy, I do not have time to even begin to address you. So everyone is gathered together, and Kama sees Lita and goes,
"My little sister?"
And so we get his flashback. Now, see if you can follow along here. Kama explains that when he was little, his mother was enchanted by Lestrange, placed under mind control and forced to have a kid with him. Kama's father makes him take an unbreakable vow to kill the person that Lestrange loves most in revenge. Now, Kama's mother gives birth to a baby who turned out to be Lita, but then she died in childbirth. But Lita is not loved by Lestrange. Instead, Lestrange had another baby with another completely separate and unnamed woman, and this is the baby he actually loves. And that baby was Corvus Lestrange, who was also Credence. But Lestrange knew that Kama was going to come after him, so he sent Lita and the new baby away to America for safekeeping. Which apparently worked because Kama, despite being sworn to kill Credence, did not feel compelled to cross the ocean. Which you think is explained by him saying he saw a news story that the ship had sunk, except he immediately says that he knew that the baby had survived. Did he get all that? Because I barely did.
Is uncruelly banished, despair of the daughter, return great avenger with wings from the water.
What are you even saying right now? But now we're caught up on that, so now we can maybe finally get some forward momentum on the story.
Corvus Lestrange is already dead! I killed him!
Or we could pop into a second flashback, that works too. So the elf lady that died earlier had taken Lita and Corvus on a boat, but Corvus was crying and Lita couldn't stand it, so she went down the hall and switched Corvus with the baby that was sleeping. But oh no, the ship is sinking now! And I think this is supposed to be the Titanic? I don't know, it seems like it, and it'd be funny if it was. Anyways, Lita takes away the new switched baby, and this woman now has Corvus Lestrange, but their lifeboat capsizes. Oh no! Now the real Corvus has been drowned in the ocean. That new switched baby grew up to be Credence. So after all this exposition and rambling and flashbacks, the big reveal of Credence's family is... I don't know. So what has been accomplished here? I don't see what Lita gets out of this. She already knew all of this. Is telling everyone the story supposed to give her closure? I don't think she's a strong enough character to make that satisfying. Kama finds out that his motivation has been irrelevant for years now. The reveal doesn't seem to radically change how the other characters see her.
You didn't mean to do it, Lita. So it wasn't your fault.
This is what the entire movie has hinged around, and we get nothing. We don't even get a Last Jedi, your parents were nobody's answer, which would at least have some kind of consequence for people who think Credence comes from an important family. We just get nothing. I am so glad to have spent the last 2 hours of my life building up to this. But hey, the movie decides to finally have mercy on us and make something happen. A wall opens to reveal that they are right next to Grindelwald's big wizard rally, very convenient. And it's here that Grindelwald delivers his mission statement of his movement. He insists that he doesn't hate Muggles, and in fact, he wants to help everyone by stopping another war. And he summons visions of World War II and what are very clearly concentration camp lines, and says he wants to prevent this. Now, of course, he's being disingenuous. We see that what he says in the rally about Muggles doesn't match up with what he says behind closed doors. But at the same time, we, the audience, know that another war is coming. We know that this prediction is true. This is a thing that actually happened. Even if he's not sincere in his motivations, Grindelwald's new mission statement is that he wants to prevent the Holocaust, and the protagonists, by defeating him, will stop him from stopping the Holocaust. Is it possible to spin a gut-wrenching and powerful story from this dilemma? Well, I'm not gonna try it, and I don't for a second believe Joanne Rowling is the person to try it either. But let's step back, okay? So, J.K. Rowling wants her magical world to intersect with World War II. How would I do this? First of all, I wouldn't. But if I really had to, here's how I'd do it. Grindelwald is destined to be defeated in 1945, right? The answer here is painfully simple. You have Grindelwald on the bad guy's side. Make him collaborate with the Nazis in a pulpy Indiana Jones style way. That's what I just kinda assumed happened, until this movie decided to prove me wrong. Anyways, this guy right here casts a killing curse on one of Grindelwald's followers. This is Cassius Bell, apparently. And this confuses me because I thought he was planted here by Grindelwald to intentionally kill someone and make the wizard cops look like the bad guys. But according to the fan wiki, apparently this was a genuine accident. Gee, if only there was any other spell you could use to subdue someone attacking you without harming them.
The
Petrificus totalis.
If only. So now Grindelwald is like, see, we are not the violent ones, and disbands his rally, with his followers all leaving. And among his followers is now Queenie, who implores Jacob, her muggle boyfriend, to join her.
No!
Work with me!
You're crazy.
Yeah, pretty much nails it. Also, Lita, whom we've spent 2 hours going in circles about, yeah, like I said earlier, she's dead now. Yeah, she just dies. She's gone. This wasn't a sacrifice to save Newt and Theseus. They can just apparate away at any time. And again, she's barely mentioned in the next movie. What a waste of Zoe Kravitz's time and talents. Grindelwald apparates away and leaves behind these giant fire dragons that the main heroes have to stop, and then they do, and the gang all poof back to Hogwarts. Dumbledore comes out to meet them, and Newt steps forward, and I love this shot here. Why are there so many people here? Why is Nagini here? Why is Kama here? I don't even remember who these two guys are. And poor Jacob is just shoved in the back. Honestly, a perfect visual representation of the way the story's heart has been pushed aside. Oh, but the story's not done ruining itself yet. Newt holds up this little thing. Oh yeah, this was showing up in Dumbledore's memories earlier, and then the Niffler stole it from Grindelwald during his little speech. Which was a little tonally dissonant, having this cutesy moment at a wizard Nazi rally. Anyways, it turns out this little pendant thingy symbolizes a blood pact that keeps Grindelwald and Dumbledore from fighting each other, and Dumbledore thinks that maybe they can destroy it. The one interesting story beat that this movie could have had left, Dumbledore not fighting Grindelwald because they were former lovers and he feels too guilty about their past together, is simplified to destroy magic item to unlock the boss battle. But the movie, believe it or not, is still not done ruining the story. Because at the very last second, Grindelwald welcomes Credence into his ranks. And we finally get some information about who his family is.
Aurelius Dumbledore.
And let me tell you, at this wild revelation, the entire theater crowd I was with went, wait, what? Because if Credence is a Dumbledore, then Lita switched them. This woman here should be a Dumbledore? Why didn't she just apparate away? Go into your room, close the door, and apparate away. I mean, I guess I promised not to criticize a movie like this. I don't care anymore anyways. It's over now. And thank the Lord for that. God, what an awful slog. It feels like it's crafted with surgeon-like precision to torpedo anything enjoyable left over from its predecessor. Its aimless plotting numbs the mind. It's a franchise product that only serves to set up the next installment while offering only the tiniest crumbs of entertainment and emotional payoff. And even that's a generous description. This is the movie that shattered my nostalgia for Harry Potter. This is a movie that made me finally say, maybe this series isn't as good as I thought it was. I don't want to say that it ruined my childhood because that's a ridiculous claim to make about anything, but it did fundamentally alter my relationship with this franchise that had shaped me so much. And obviously this is far from the worst thing J.K. Rowling has done. This is far from the worst thing J.K. Rowling has written. But her anti-queer agenda merely served as the nail in the coffin. For me, it was the Crimes of Grindelwald that killed the Wizarding World in the first place. It was Crimes of Grindelwald that made me realize that these stories were bloated and unfocused. It was Crimes of Grindelwald that showed me these themes and ideas never came together, that this world never grew beyond a child's mentality. It was Crimes of Grindelwald that prompted me to start looking for magic elsewhere. But that's okay, because it turns out Lord of the Rings is better.